Many people also think that Bitcoin is a trustless system or stateless system. That observation is easily exaggerated. Let's look at the notion of it being stateless and being beyond the control of any government. Well, at one level, this blockchain, remember, it exists in thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of copies spread around the world, and everybody's got copies of it, and the miners update it and refresh it all the time. Well, to the extent that the blockchain exists out there in internet space, and internet space isn't within the jurisdiction of any government, that's entirely accurate to say that at that peer-to-peer level, you could argue that the transactions in Bitcoin and other similar systems are beyond the reach of any government. Okay. But as soon as you attempt to interact with the real world by either taking real value out of the system, by saying, for example, I want to get cash that I can use to buy a cup of coffee for my Bitcoin, then the state has the ability to regulate your actions, because at that point, you exist in the physical world and you're subject to the jurisdiction of the authorities in whichever jurisdiction you happen physically to exist. So as soon as you try to put value into the system or take value out of the system, the real world, the corporeal world, is interacting with the internet, this vague thing that's beyond the government, and you then give rise to the ability of the government to exercise jurisdiction over the persons engaging with the internet or the Bitcoin, or the value that's going into or out of the system. So again, it depends on how you look at it. If you just want to limit it to the system itself and say there's no connection to the real world, great. But then Bitcoin is just a giant video game, and it's never a situation where value is moving into or out of the system. As soon as you let value move into and out of the system, the government has a lever. It's got a hook. It's got jurisdiction that it can exercise over the people moving the value into and out of the system, and that's extraordinarily important. Which brings us to the question of trust. Many people interact with Bitcoin and other forms of crypto through exchanges. Well, as soon as you're interacting through an exchange, guess who you're trusting? You're trusting the exchange. What if the exchange loses your crypto? What if the crypto gets stolen from the exchange? What if it turns out that the exchange is run by a bunch of crooks who pack up one day and head off to Minsk, all right, or Kiev, or somewhere else, and you never see them again, all right? So as soon as you're dealing with any intermediary in the crypto space, and a very, very large percentage of smaller investors are dealing with intermediaries, you're trusting somebody. You're not, it's not a situation where you've got to trust the people that are operating, or the system that's operating at the crypto level. It's the intermediary through which you're putting in value and taking the value out. If you're not going to rely on one of these intermediaries, you're typically going to have to store information. You're going to have to store your code someplace else. And at that point, you've got to trust your system not to lose your code or not to have your code valued, and then have the ability to transfer the code to people to whom you want to transfer it when the time comes to transfer it. So the notion of these systems really being stateless is easily exaggerated, and the notion of the systems being trustless is also easily exaggerated. We're human beings. We all exist in physical forms. At that level, governments have jurisdiction and control over all of us. And the idea of having something with value where you don't have to trust anybody else about that value, it's pretty hard to do.